the great institute where we have gathered here, the various activities carried on by her, and of course the researches in which she is and her colleagues are involved. From that time onwards, I have been all the time very eagerly thinking of coming to the institute. Somehow, in last 1 year, you can say I could not come, but today I am so glad that she has found an occasion for me to come here, meet all of you, the galaxy of scholars who are working here. And I was really glad to know that the tradition of Sanskrit learning, as also our, you can say, pursuit for researches in our culture, they are so assiduously being followed here. I could see that from some of the publications, of which, of course, I knew, but I have been discussing a lot with her regarding so many things in ancient Indian culture. Probably, I am not a very well-suited person to give an inaugural address on a subject like Mahabharata. Mahabharata has so many dimensions, and one is really not only perplexed but dumbfounded when we take into consideration the various facets which this great story, for the others probably it is a story, it is a great epic for us. As a child, you can say, I was introduced to Sanskrit learning quite early, and therefore my fascination was, as soon as I got some, you can say, dexterity or some, you can say, good introduction into the language, the first thing my father told me was to read Mahabharata. And whenever I used to go back to my house during vacations, my only opposition was to read Mahabharata. The thing which impressed me very much right from my childhood was that if you read many of the Parvans, right from the Bhishma Parvan to the Ashwatthama Parvan, there are so many descriptions of personal combats, some groups coming together and attacking each other. There are incidents like that of the fight of Abhimanyu with the rest of the warriors. Meaning what I used to get amazed at, that many times the description will be like that he now took up an arrow from his back, and then as he was Vyasachin, with alternate hands he used to take those things and shoot the arrows, and then a complete rain of arrows was showered by the other person. And not at all afraid of it, he again showered back. You see, if I write a description of a war incident, I have not seen many battles, but even if I see it today, I think I won't be able to tell it for more than 5 minutes. And here the descriptions go on through all these Parvans, and one is never tired, you see. It is so fascinating. As put by one of the great stalwarts who studied Mahabharata, not only simply to understand it, but to critically edit it. V.S. Suktankar, that great legend of a scholar, he tells you that, shloka is a simple meter, but it has got so many nuances, and Vyasa has used those nuances in such a wonderful manner that it will be simply Rasva and Dirgha, but then sometimes it is Rasva and 3 Dirghas. So he has employed the meter, simple meter as it looks. A shloka meter is a simple meter. And shloka, if I understand it correctly, is to praise somebody. That is how the meter must have come into existence. It is an elaboration of the Gayatri meter, you see. So that meter has been employed by Vyasa in such a wonderful manner that, one doesn't one doesn't realize that, well, 100,000 stanzas and verses can be written mostly in that. Coming back to some of the things, my reminiscences and other things, when I grew up, I had an occasion to go and visit Southeast Asia. It was Dr. Somaya, who was a great enthusiastic of Hindu religion, and he had great passion to visit Cambodia, Thailand, and so many other things. And I had the opportunity and fortune to accompany him. After seeing the monuments, because I was quite familiar with the monuments, I was trained by an archaeologist and historian like Professor van Leeuwen de Leeuw in Holland, in Southeast Asian archaeology and art history. So I was somewhat familiar, I can say, with all those things, and therefore I was trying to explain those things. In the evening, we were told that we are going to have some entertainment. People were probably quite exhausted and they were reluctant. But then Dr. Somaya told us that, well, we are going to see some wonderful performances. The occasion was that the Southeast Asian countries, they have something like their own organization, like our own SAARC organization. And they were meeting together. When they meet together, what is the thing which binds them together? They say that all these presentations which will be on the occasion when all these Southeast Asian countries, they will come together, it will be the performances from the epics, their epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata. So the renderings are such wonderful things that in fact, Ramakyan, that is the way they understand Ramakyana. And it spread all through up to the Polynesian countries. So that is a binding factor, cultural binding factor, even for the Southeast Asian countries which vary in their religious affiliation. Many of these are now countries that respect and follow Islam. Some of them are Christian countries. Some of them are Buddhist countries. If you go to the palace of the king of Thailand, who is again Rama the Ninth, they carry on that tradition of our epics, you see. The king is called Rama and the capital is Ayodhya. Many people in Thailand will refuse to accept that Ayodhya is there in India. They will say that no, Ayodhya is here. And if you see the palace, what is it? On the palace, you can say walls of those palaces. That is the wall which protects that particular palace. Therein all Ramayana has been depicted. So we'll find that the epics, both Ramayana and it was a shock to me when I visited the airport of Java, you see. There is a huge statue in the beginning itself when you come out of the airport, and that statue is of Arjuna standing on a ratha. So this story, it is not a story, it's a part of the life, the ethical, you can say, life and metaphysics of the people. So this is the way one has to look at it. I can give you a small incident again, another incident with which I was really impressed, and that is, I had an occasion, we had taken up the work of excavating the site at Nagara in the vicinity of Gondia in the state of Maharashtra. Usually the people around, they are very reluctant when archaeological parties, they take up excavations. They are reluctant because those are their sacred sites or something like that, and when we excavate, they many times feel that we are going to desecrate it. And in this case, at Nagara, people were slightly in a sort of an opposing mood because of the earlier experiences at Pauni. People stopped the excavations at Pauni halfway because then if the excavation had to be completed, the temple of Hardolala, the village divinity, had to be removed from there. People did not like it, and therefore the excavations were to the dismay of the Archaeological Survey of India and Nagpur University, we are trying to convince them that we are bringing back your history, our history, to the fore and bringing it afresh, shedding a new light on it. People did not agree with it, and therefore I was very cautious. So I approached the Sarpanch there, and he was very happy. He said that this mound is there, this Bhairav Tekdi is there, and you can carry on excavations there. Only thing we expect that when you hire the labor here, preference should be given to the people who are from the village. I said, naturally, we have come here and we are going to work with the help of the people. So when it was agreed, and then he said that, sir, why are you unnecessarily, because to bring the tents and other things, that was a great thing. It was another expenditure of 5,000 to 10,000 rupees, which we could not afford. Our own estimate was something like 50,000 rupees. And then he said that it is better you live in the Dharmashala, which is there. We will reserve rooms for you. You can carry on excavations. But he cautioned me. He said that during the Shivaratri, you will have some, for 3 or 4 days, we got a fair here, and you will have some disturbance. I said, nothing doing, what is there? Shivaratri is there, we are also Hindus, we will worship. To my dismay, when the Shivaratri came, it was a 7-day festival. And every day, throughout the night, it was not simply bhajan. For 3 days, it was a recital, dance recital, I was told. We went, can you imagine, there was a lady who came from Chhattisgarh, and she was residing in the Chhattisgarh Boli. And what was the theme? The theme was Mahabharata. It was a one-act play, a single lady with a lute in her hand and singing in Chhattisgarh the Mahabharata, and enacting all the scenes for 7 days. It was a feast, I tell you, to see the Mahabharata being rendered in such a wonderful manner. After 2 or 3 years, when I very enthusiastically told everybody about this particular thing, and this was a great experience too. I didn't know Chhattisgarhi Boli, but then the way she acted, reacted, and gave the presentation in a dramatic performance, everything was very clear. Everything was very clear. All the different characters, whether it is Bhishma or whether it is Yudhishthira, whether it is Draupadi, she will enact those things. And after 2 or 3 years, one day when I opened the newspaper like this, and the awardee was P.Jan Bai. I had heard P.Jan Bai reciting Mahabharata. Mahabharata is like this. It has reached not only beyond the shores of our country, but it has gone deep into the forests and deep into the minds of the people. You see, when you look at Mahabharata, these were the things which touched my heart, and definitely right from the childhood. But when I was initiated as an archaeologist in Nevasa, it was in 1960-61, you can say, season, and Professor Sankarya was carrying out excavations at Nevasa. His discoveries at Nevasa are quite well known to the world of scholars. It is published as From Prehistory to History at Nevasa. Because Sankarya was all the time, the passion in the mind of Professor Sankarya was that well, there is something like a man in China, Peking man. There is something like a Java man, but there is no India man. Ours is such a great civilization. It is an exceptional civilization, you see. I don't know whether you have heard the word Old World civilizations. Old World was quite, meaning before some 25 years, it was quite wonderful to talk about the Old World. And it was part of the syllabus also in the Bombay University. It continued up to 1977. I failed to understand what is the meaning of the old world. All those civilizations which are there in Sumeria, Egypt, Chaldea, and all those places, Syria, Iraq and others, they are referred to as the old world civilizations. The meaning of the old world civilization is that all those civilizations which are pre-Christian civilizations are the old world civilizations. This is the simple meaning of that. Because with the rise of Christianity, with the rise of the Abrahamic religions taking their firm roots in Israel and West Asia, and its manifestation in the form of Christianity, there was a completely new wave, and all the religious beliefs which were otherwise supported by great pharaohs and kings and great emperors, they simply vanished. And Christianity took over because it had brought a new message for the downtrodden people, the people of the lower classes. They embraced this great religion which was showing them the hope of, you can say, heaven. That was the message of the Christ, and therefore all these religious beliefs and traditions, they were totally wiped out, you can say. Same thing was done later on by Islam. It gave a new hope to the people of West Asia. If you see the rest of the world, there are only two civilizations, and probably in America, of course, they were totally unaffected till the time the British took them over or the Europeans took them over. There are two civilizations which continued. That is, one is Chinese and the other is Indian civilization. The Indian civilization, it continued, or you can say the Indo-Iranian civilization or the Indo-European civilization. It continued earlier in the form of the Greeks and Romans, but that was also swept away by Christianity. Whereas the Western religion and the religion of the Vedas, it continued. It continued from the proto-historic times, and therefore we don't talk about the Indus Valley civilization as the old world civilization. It is our civilization. There is some continuity. We are trying to find out the roots of that. In fact, all the classical excavations which are conducted by the Europeans, they had those two needs, you see. I sometimes, you see, I have sympathies, great sympathies for the Europeans. They have a difficulty. Their difficulty is that intellectually they are rooted to Greek and Rome. And emotionally, naturally, their roots are there in Israel, West Asia, because of Christianity. And therefore, when they wanted to search for their identity, naturally excavations were carried out. The great Jewish scholar who excavated, first of all, Troy, because our intellectual roots are there, and after the Renaissance, the Europeans were naturally very much fervent to understand that particular aspect of their civilization which was totally unknown to them. They came to know about it through Arabia, through the translations which were there of Aristotle and others. And therefore, all these excavations wanted to be equipped with the classical languages. The other places, they did not have any, but they had the fortune of having something like the Rosetta Stone, through which they deciphered their own, you can say, emotional roots. In the case of the Indians, we continued from the proto-history. In Persia, we continued from the Avestan period. That is a thread of continuation which comes to us from the Persian civilization, the Achaemenid kings and so many others, till the time they were overtaken by Islam. And in India, it continues through the Vedas, the epics and the other literature. So we are really fortunate, and therefore, naturally at some point, archaeologists like B.B. Lal, they were naturally fascinated to understand what it is. And there was something like, you can say, one has to say it like that there is something like Ramayana archaeology, there is something like Mahabharata archaeology. And the great discovery which was made by him at Hastinapur, he said that because of the reference which is there in the Mahabharata, that the capital of Hastinapura was swept away and the remains of that or reminiscences of that were found in the excavation. There was a complete layer of sand, you can say, and therefore Professor B.B. Lal came to the conclusion that, well, he has found the real Mahabharata level at Hastinapur. He, of course, readily, very clearly said that, well, 900 or 1000 BC should be the date for Mahabharata. Scholars continued. But if you take today's picture, we'll find that we are still fighting with that. I will tell you one way. You see, why in a way, when I was trained at Nivasa, I was told by Professor Sankaraya, in his informal talks, he was very fervent. He said that I want to know what these Chalcolithic cultures of the Deccan and the central India are. And one of his hypotheses was, probably these were the people of Mahabharata. And therefore he was trying to compare the pottery of all these sites which were excavated by us in central India and in Maharashtra as also in Madhya Pradesh, is to compare them with similar Chalcolithic cultures of Iran. Somehow that particular thing was lost, and he was all the time saying that probably all these people, they probably belong to that period. And now later on we know that they had contacts with the Indus Valley civilization. The problem has become more and more complex. After finding of a new surge of excavations which are carried on in Gangetic Valley, now the Chalcolithic cultures there, they go back to 2500 BC. And the scholars are now rethinking what was the time of Mahabharata. Earlier we were saying that the traditional reckoning was probably based on some astronomical concept or conviction of the astrologers of 5th century AD, including Aryabhata, that it was something like 3000 BC. But with now the findings which are there not only in the Gangetic Valley, earlier it was thought that the Aryans were invaders, they came from outside, and after the disintegration of the Indus Valley civilization, they spread into the Gangetic plain. And so many passages. Our sources in Mahabharata and literature are so immense that, well, when a scholar, he takes a dip at one particular place and he says that he has found the final solution. The forest is so deep and so dense that, well, it is a temporary joy for him. As I said, now the scholars are thinking in terms that, well, if the Chalcolithic and the iron also goes back to something like 2000 BC, then in that case we will have to rethink about the date of Mahabharata. And again I am telling you that, well, we will have to revive that particular zest which was there in earlier people. Sankara was discussing about the date of Ramayana. He said that it cannot go beyond 800 BC because the archaeological findings were like that. But now we are saying that, well, Ramayana, if Mahabharata can go back to something like 2500 BC or 3000 BC, Ramayana will have to be still earlier. These two epics, they are so enormous and they are so, you can say, so complex that probably, at least intellectuals like me, I call myself an intellectual, but they are not say that, well, I am solving the problem. There are so many things which come up. The problems are so complex that probably teamwork will have to be there. And therefore, coming to that, somebody asked me, what is your opinion as an archaeologist, you see, about Mahabharata? I tell them very frankly and sometimes jocularly, that you see, in Mahabharata there was something like 18 Akshaurani of army. Akshaurani, some mathematicians have calculated. For my simple mathematical brain, I would say that it was at least more than 1 lakh. At least more than 1 lakh. So if suppose 18 lakh people died in a given place at Kurukshetra, and they used not only swords and javelins and spikes and so many other things, but mainly, you can say, bows and arrows. at least 18 lakh arrowheads should be found at one place. Scholars have not been able to find out a site in Kurukshetra where they have found more than 1000 or something like that arrowheads. So I said, no, probably Mahabharata was a figment of imagination of the people. That's how a rationalist will try to tell us. Are we going to accept it? It is complex because, as explained by our own Dr. Nandita Krishnan, the theme developed in three, as we know it, as Jaya, Bharata and Mahabharata. We have to as yet dissect and try to understand what exactly is the composition of that particular thing. V.S. Suktankar, who wrote a wonderful, he gave 4 lectures in the Asiatic Society in 1942. And that was in his ripe years after he had retired as one of the, you can say, main editors of that particular thing. He gave 4 lectures. The first lecture is the modern critics of Mahabharata. The second lecture is the mundane Mahabharata. The third lecture is the ethical Mahabharata. And the fourth lecture was to be metaphysical Mahabharata. May I tell you that this man, with all his ripe understanding of Mahabharata, he gave these 3 lectures, and when on the 4th lecture, on the 4th day, people had gathered, they had to listen to the sad news that he had died in the morning. The 4th lecture was not delivered, it was read out. It was then later on published. I still read that book with great fascination. He tells us what the critics say about Mahabharata. There were different types of interpretations of Mahabharata. It is because Mahabharata is 8 times bigger than Iliad and the other epic of Europe put together. 1 lakh stanzas. These 2 epics together from the Greeks, they hardly are 25,000 verses. So he says that there were different types of approaches. There was an atomist type of approach which was there, you see. They tried to analyze, and he said that I have worked as an analytical, you can say, Indologist. That is the way. I have to analyze things and then try to dissect the whole thing and then try to understand it. Then he says that one theory says that probably the real heroes were the Kauravas. That is called the inversion theory. The real heroes were the Kauravas, but later on, as the Pandavas who had come from outside, there was a white race or something like that, because Arjuna means white, Pandu means pale white or something like that. And therefore, these were the persons who had come from outside. Kauravas were the original things. These invaders came and they deceitfully annihilated the Kauravas. But when they became established, naturally the story had to be told in their favor. Actually, if Mahabharata is taken to be the epic which tells you about dharma, was the act of killing Bhishma, was the act of killing Karna, was the act of killing Duryodhana, where according to the dharma, they were all deceitful people. But as they were the conquerors, naturally the history was theirs. And therefore Jaya was written. And therefore a completely inverse theory is there. Then they say that, well, actually the story was very small. And then it became bigger and bigger. Our own tradition says that it expanded. It was told elaborately. But we never say that it was not Vyasa who wrote it. We all the time say, and if the analysis is done, Yardi was an ICS officer, who statistically, you can say, studied one part of it, and that is Bhagavad Gita and all the Mahabharata. He came to the conclusion, curiously enough, that, well, strangely enough, there is something like a unity in this particular epic. How it can be written by one person, 100,000 stanzas, verses, whatever his genius and all those things, how can he write like this? It is impossible. but the impossible was done. And therefore, many people have various views, completely contradictory views regarding these things. And therefore he says that I myself feel after studying Mahabharata for, I don't know.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead. Please go.
I will go on talking. So he says that I am personally convinced, a person who has dedicated his whole life to Mahabharata says, I am convinced that Vyasa has done it. You may find there is sudden recension wherein as a very simple student like mine will say that many times there are something like 214 chapters which are there in some of the southern recension which are not to be found in the northern recension, and that is why the whole exercise was done. And ultimately the Mahabharata critical text came out. They simply say it is critically put together text. They are not saying that we are final. But there is something to go by. And then when he says that if you see that, well, there are so many contradictions, they say. I mean, all these scholars, there is a complete array of scholars who are against accepting Mahabharata as a unified text. And there were so many theories, as I told you, atomist theory, the inversion theory, all those theories were there. In spite of that, he says that if you look at it only simply from the point of view of a literary composition, it is unmatched. The characters, and then he goes on describing how Karna, how Bhishma, they come out in their light, and then he says that there is something like a conflict between the inner soul, the antaryami of everybody, and the acts of the person. These are mortals, you see. They are in conflict, even if they are great. Yudhishthira had to tell a lie. Arjuna had to take Shikhandi. He was the greatest, you can say, archer in the world. But then such things do happen. So he says that you have to look at it from the point of view of the inner conflict of these great characters which are involved in a great, you can say, event that had happened. And that changed the whole. And therefore, a person, scholar like Durga Bhagavat says that, well, Mahabharata is nothing else but Yuganta. There was a change in hand about the ethical things which are in the mind of the people. This is again an interpretation, I will simply say. Interpretation that, well, it represents, and therefore its sounds are there in the Veda. For example, the Yama Yama Sutta tells that Agata Gachan Uttara Yugani. Yama says that, well, now we are changing the times. So that probably is reflected, that's what Durga Bhagavat says. And her interpretation is that probably there was something like an ethical order, which was the Vedic ethical order, and that transformed itself into an altogether different type of thing. Coming to, I need not talk about, probably I am not a worthy person to talk about Dharma. It is such a subtle, sukshma vishaya that probably I will have to spend another lifetime, and I am very glad. I am a Hindu. I will say that, well, in next birth, I will follow the thing and try to understand it. I will have to give so many births to understand that particular thing. But what fascinated most for me was the metaphysical part of it. From my recent researches, well, in a way, every scholar has his own time of saying with the conviction and pride and so many other things. Probably that is to be avoided, overcome. My recent attraction to Mahabharata was the Narayaniya Upakhyana. The essence of the Bhagavad Gita, the essence of the teachings of, you can say, the Mahabharata itself. I look at Mahabharata from a different point of view. When we studied under Professor Dandekar, he told us that, see, you have to look at the religious thought of the Vedas from a different angle. And he used, curiously enough, the Marxist way of understanding, that is, you can say, thesis, synthesis, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. He said that sacrificial karma doctrine which was there became very powerful during the commentatorial period of the Brahmanas, and there was the excess of everything. The simple concept of sacrifice, which is expressed through the Purusha Sukta, that is when the primordial being sacrificed himself, the world was created. And by performing the Darsha Purnamasa, or for that matter the daily sacrifice, everybody, every householder became in tune with that, you can say, great feat of creation. So sacrifice was something like the creation of the world. The altar was creation of the cosmos. There are 5 layers of the altar and there are 5 phases of the atmosphere and this earth. This is how the whole symbolism goes on. But when it came to the social and the political sphere, the Ashwamedha Yaga, the Vajpayee Yaga, all the 37, you can say, institutions of sacrifice which are there, we'll find it was an excess. And this is very well reflected in some of the, you can say, remarks which are made by great souls like Mahavira and the Buddha. They get tired. And so many cows are, or you can say animals, innocent animals are being sacrificed in all these sacrifices. And therefore, there was a complete Shramana movement which was against the whole thing. And then on our side also, as my professor told me, that well, from this thesis of excess of sacrifices, emphasis on karman for attaining Swarga, there was an antithesis, and that was of the Upanishads of renunciation. The synthesis was the Chaturashrama system. That well, the world is to be enjoyed, the ahika life is to be enjoyed, or as it is put by the philosophers of the later period, Abhyudaya and Nishreyasa have their own place. Abhyudaya can be followed in the Grihastha-ashrama, for Nishreyasa you can afterwards do that. And this way a solution was found out for the renunciation religion. And then our Smarta tradition, this way goes on getting itself. We talk about the Purva Mimamsa and Uttara Mimamsa. That is how we try to understand our tradition. When you come to the other side, that is the Buddhism and Jainism, we realize that those renunciation religions also could not go beyond a particular limit, because they had to. There was something like an innovation of Mahayana, which told that a householder can be a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva can be a householder. He can attain nirvana. In fact, he stops his nirvana so that because of karuna, compassion for the people, if the doctrine of the ephemeral nature of this samsara is real and understood properly, then in that case, if I attain nirvana, rest of the ananta jivas, they are going to be boiled in this inferno of the worldly life. What about them? And therefore, Avalokiteshvara says that I am stopping my nirvana and working for the welfare of the people. So there is a different way which has been found. It has not, renunciation has its own limits, and therefore those persons who are aspiring for spiritual liberation, they have to also look after the souls which are suffering. It is their responsibility, and therefore the doctrine of Loka Sangraha has been told in the Bhagavad Gita. It is from this point of view that, well, even if an aspirant, he wants to go ahead, at the same time he has to follow the worldly things for the Loka Sangraha. Loka Yatra has been told for the Rajarshi of the Chanakya's Arthashastra. Similarly, Jainism finds out a shortcut for the householders in the form of the Shiksha Vratas and the Guna Vratas. So, there is something like a balance which is brought about. So, on one hand, the Chaturashrama system was there, but those who remained steadfast in the renunciatory path, they had to follow their own way of life. And that part in the Hindu tradition, in the Vedic tradition, was the Agamas. the Shaiva and the Vaishnava, which is called Pancharatra Satvata Dharma, that has been told in the Narayaniya Upanishad, you see. That Narayaniya Upakhyana is all on that. There are about something like 2000 stanzas which tell you this particular story. And then we'll find that this particular tradition, it grows or it takes roots, very solid roots. There are references. I won't go into all those and bother you with all those details. But there are Satvata inscriptions of the 3rd century AD at the end of the Kushana period, which are to be found in Punjab Valley, in the valley near, you can say, Ravi and Vipash, and at the same time the extreme, you can say, Bengal. There are 2 Satvata inscriptions which tell about the scholars who did not renounce the life, but at the same time followed the Satvata Dharma. And then we find Chandragupta II is the Rajarshi. Scholars were very much bewildered. Why is he holding this particular title of Rajarshi, you see? Rajarshi, as we find it now, Imam Rajarshayo Viduhu. The Karma Yoga has been told to the Rajarshis. Then Janakadayaha. The Rajarshis are like Janakas. So you will find that there is, and then Sankhya Yoga Prathak Bala Pravadantina Panditaha. Sankhya and Yoga are the same. Who is the representative of Sankhya? Shuka is the representative of the Sankhya. But his guru, do you know who is his guru? It is Janaka. Vyasa sends him to Janaka. When he says that, well, I have known all the Vedas, I have studied the Upanishads and so many other things, but at the same time, I would like to know what exactly I have to do. I am still perplexed. And then Vyasa says that you go and understand the inner, you can say, message of the Vedas from Janaka, who was an emperor. So we'll find that this particular yoga, and Narayaniya very clearly shows that there are so many similarities in the Karma Yoga. So the Karma Yoga Bhagavad Gita is nothing else but Satvata Pancharatra Dharma, according to me. That's how I have come to the conclusion. And this was a great tradition. This tradition was upheld by the Vakatakas. The son-in-law, he became a Satvata because of Prabhavati Gupta, and then through him we'll find that it is the Draikutakas who are now Vaishnavas, it is the Kadambas who are Vaishnavas, Parama Bhagavatas. Do you know, there is a very simple thing, meaning it is which amused me very much. And Jitam Bhagavata Purushena. You see, the inscriptions of Chandragupta II, the inscription of Prabhavati Gupta, and some Kadamba rulers as also other rulers, they start with Jitam Bhagavata Purushena. Scholars were not giving proper explanation. When I saw the Narayani Upakhyana, when the Upakhyana comes to an end, it is said that all the 5 brothers, they rose up after that particular discourse which was given to them by Bhishma, and they said, Jitam Bhagavata Purushena. So they became Sattvatas. And that dharma was followed, and my own, you can say, reconstruction, I don't know how far it will be accepted, that from the Vakatakas, Kadambas and others, then it came to the south, and it is not coincidental that the Alvars come in 6th, 7th century AD. So the great spiritual awakening which was brought in the south was through the Satvata Dharma and the Pashupata Dharma. I have just drawn your attention to only some of the aspects of, you can say, what can be Mahabharata tradition and our own tradition. Probably, as I said in the beginning, I am not a person who will be encompassing all those things. This was realized that when one single person cannot do this, and therefore I really congratulate Dr. Nandita Krishna to have brought this topic again to the fore. And we have to study Mahabharata again and again and try to understand its nature. I am reminded of the description which has been given by Narada. When he goes to the Shweta Dvipa, you see, there is only effulgence which is there all around. And the Chandraprabha Munis, they are waiting for the Bhagavat to appear. They have been working for years and years together. Ekata, Dvita and Trita, they are practicing their whole life. They are simply in skeletons, but they are shining like the moon's light. And that is why they are called Chandra Prabha Munis. They are practicing that for their whole lifetime, but none was able to see the Lord, the Parabhu. There are only two persons who have done that, and probably the third one, first is Shukra, then Narada, and then Arjuna. Probably we will have to do the same type of tapasya which these three great persons did in order to understand Mahabharata. I am very thankful that I was given this opportunity to share some of my stray thoughts, I would say. I cannot say that I have understood Mahabharata, either in a mundane manner, or an ethical manner, or for that matter, metaphysical manner. Thank you very much.